How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Ganji. Welcome to another episode of Tear Talk. Guys, great discussion today. We're going to talk about 8 reasons Rebecca and Jake Haro created their story. If you guys are not too familiar with this case, I would advise that you check out my past videos. We discussed this case in depth, not just the current case, but also we've discussed Jake Haro's past. I would advise that you guys just take a quick look at those videos if you're not familiar with this case before you jump onto this one. But me and Gary York today are going to go in deep as to why we believe Rebecca Haro and Jake Haro created their story. So let me get my guest on. What's up, Gary?
Hey, how you doing? Happy to be back again. Thank you.
It's always good to have you back, Gary. Hey, Gary, you mind introducing yourself again?
Yes, my name is Gary York. I did 10 years in the United States Army Military Police and 29 years in Florida Corrections as a state correctional officer, a state felony and probation officer. And I also did 12 years internal affairs in the Florida prison system and investigating crimes within our prisons. And then I finished my career doing another 12 years with the Polk County Sheriff's Office in Florida.
And thank you, Gary, again for coming on. So real quick, this is Emmanuel in the middle. That's Jake on the left, Rebecca on the right. Here's a better picture after they were arrested and charged for murder. That's on August 22nd. Basically, quick story is she went, as I said, she went to that Big Five and basically made a false story that Emmanuel had been kidnapped. Jake also went on air with that story as well. And then later on, they found out there's a lot of inconsistencies with the story. The police got on right away, did some investigations, but the public also knew. The public just felt that their plea just wasn't sincere. There was something not right. And then eventually on the 22nd, as I mentioned, they both get arrested for murder. As of now, Rebecca's sticking to the story of what she claims. And Jake, I don't know if he's sticking to the story because soon after that, after the arrest, he was found with the, I guess, the county sheriffs trying to find the body of Emmanuel. And during the news conference, they do believe they know where the body should have been, like where the body should be expected. But unfortunately, you have elements, you have wildlife. So now it's a bit harder to find. But what we want to discuss today is basically what are 8 reasons why Rebecca and Jake Haro created the story. Now, this is actually coming from the questions that were sent my way. So we do have 8 reasons that we're going to go ahead and explore. And again, I'm focusing a lot on Jake. I mean, be honest with you, Rebecca and Jake could be equal partners in how they abused Emmanuel. But the reason why I'm leaning a little bit heavier on Jake, I'm not saying that Rebecca is not involved at all. I'm just leaning a little heavier on Jake is because Jake has a past history of child abuse. In 2018, he assaulted Promise. Well, her name was Promise Faith, but Carolina or Carolina. I always forget how to say her name. I'm not really good with names, guys, as you probably tell when you watch this. But it was so bad that she only has 3% of her brain functioning. She's blind. She can't walk, can't talk. I mean, he ruined this child's life. And if we never find Emmanuel, Promise Faith is the story of who this monster really is. And even in the conference, they called him an experienced child abuser. In 2018, he was charged with child cruelty child cruelty. And then in 2023, the judge got very lenient with him and sentenced him to pretty much a work release program. So that kind of catches us up. Anything you'd like to say before we start in with these 8 reasons?
No, I think if I do want to tell people that we have a couple of prior videos on things concerning this case. So if they want to catch up to this point in time we're at now, so please watch those videos as well.
Yes. Now, the first thing I got, and again, when I was making this list up, I am focusing a little bit more on Jake, but that doesn't mean I'm not considering Rebecca. Of course, I'm considering Rebecca, but I'm leaning on Jake, as many of us are, but it doesn't minimize Rebecca's involvement. So the one thing I got is basically to keep eyes off Jake. So Jake's past abuse history, which we just mentioned, you want to shift suspicion as a survival tactic. So basically, hey, they're gonna catch us, so I got to create a story to take it off of us and onto something else. That's why they invent this person who could have taken the baby. Last thing he said was "Hola." Rebecca's role in redirecting attention, so that's where she, I think, is her main involvement. And then this is unique. I wanted to add to this how abusers often rely on enablers to help mask their behaviors. Did you see that the first time around with Jake and Vanessa? And are you seeing that right now with Jake and Rebecca? And Gary, first question is, why would Rebecca's first instinct be to protect Jake rather than the victim? And how do investigators spot that kind of deflection early on?
Well, we all know that Jake has an already proven history of abuse. My personal belief is that he is also abusive to Rebecca, either mentally and or physically. And I believe he uses manipulation and intimidation on her. She possibly, remember now, folks, these are all possibilities. She possibly has low self-esteem. She's possibly scared of him. We may find out later they were both, as you said, equally involved in this scheme. But I think Jake is the stronger manipulator, the stronger abuser. And I think that she's going to be a little bit scared to talk against him, a little bit scared at this point to tell all and tell the truth of what's really going on. How do investigators get through all that? Well, we listen to the stories that they're telling us. We look for inconsistencies in the stories. We see if their stories match evidence, but we don't just stop. We ask the same questions. The same question can be asked over and over, but with a different context. So, but the same question. Eventually, people that are lying will mess up just by nature, and you'll see inconsistencies in her statement, his statement. And when you see those inconsistencies, you may even get a little piece of the truth in there that they accidentally threw in, not really consciously knowing that they're giving away some of the truth. And when this happens, you have the power to add more questions and put more pressure on and hopefully eventually get the truth. Right now, she's being quiet and not telling anything.
Yeah, I could picture, she's also sticking to her story for survival mode as well. I think that there could be a point where maybe Jake got aggressive with the child. I think there's something in the house that police have been able to determine that this child was abused in the house. And I believe that the child was murdered in the house. I believe that they really believe by what they found, there's enough evidence to get the murder charge. I believe it's really based on what they discovered in the house. And I believe that Jake could have told her, this is what I've done. And we can have two outcomes here. She could go right to protect him if her love for him is greater than her love for her own flesh and blood, her own child. I mean, it could happen. Like Gary said, he could be an expert manipulator. This is if she wasn't part of the abuse. But then again, if you're letting it happen, you sort of are. But I also think if Jake goes up to her and says, hey, I did this to our child, even if she had a reaction to do something, I think Jake, if he couldn't control her by, protect me, and she was still more concerned about Emmanuel, he could turn it around on her and say, well, I'm going to come at you then. Because at the end of the day, we're both involved in this. And at this point, I'm going to put pressure on you. I'm going to make sure that we both go down for this. And I think that could be definitely something that could create a big shift. And that's why the narrative, because I think this narrative wasn't created the moment Emmanuel died. I think they sat on this narrative for a few days to decide what would best work. And I think this was a dialogue where maybe one party, because they also had a 2-year-old, right? So I'm thinking maybe the 2-year-old, I don't know how they were with the 2-year-old, but maybe the 2-year-old would go out more, so people weren't questioning so much about the 2-year-old. But the 7-month-old, maybe you could justify why the 7-month-old doesn't go out as much, because it's 7 months. Oh, she's home with mommy. He's home with mommy. He's home with mommy. Until eventually people start asking. And I think there was pressure. I could be wrong, but I think there was pressure to come up with something, because people are going to start asking. So we got to think of something. We got to come up with something. And that's when, they decide, okay, let's run it this way. But I think when they did it, it could have been for her effort to protect Jake. But I also think he could have turned it around on her and said, okay, you want to play this game and you want to try to turn me in, or you want to try to do the right thing. Maybe she wanted to do something right in the moment. We don't know. He could easily turn around and say, hey, listen, if you do this, they're going to come after me. Look at my past history. They're going to come after me. And maybe she's sympathetic towards her. Maybe she says, I don't care. Emmanuel comes first. Oh, think twice about that. Because if you want to go ahead and do this, we're going to both go down. And does that make sense, Gary, to you?
Yes, and absolutely. There was a few days in between before the made-up abduction story was given. So, in my opinion, they were definitely sitting back and thinking, okay, what do we do now? What do we do now? We have to do something. And they were planning something out, and they came up with this abduction story. She has a black eye, I believe. How did that get there? Probably from him. He could have said, we got to make it look real. Who knows how that black eye got there? But I think in the end, we're going to find out how all this came together. It's just which one is going to give up the other one. And as you say, that one of them is going to say, I'm not going down alone. You're going down with me.
And as I said, I think there was pressure. That's what caused them to jump and tell the narrative. I think eventually there was pressure to what's going on with Emmanuel. And I think eventually they said, hey, we got to do something. And eventually this was the idea, because to be honest with you, it really is sloppy. I mean, to go out to a big 5, which, has got to have some type of surveillance or something going on, and just to start a scene that way. I'm sure that there could have been, sadly, other ways to do it that would have been more manageable, but they jumped on this. I think this is where they became very sloppy, and going on the news right away, because obviously the public saw that they were insincere. So I thank God for if there was pressure, thanks God for the pressure, because the pressure made them sloppy. Number 2, actually, I got these labeled here. So that was, remember, titles 8 reasons Rebecca and Jake Haro created the story. We just did to keep the eyes off Jake, but we kind of merged it with other things. Then I got to keep police out of their house. So fear of hidden evidence being discovered, avoiding or delaying warrants, narrative as a short-term shield. This is again to buy time. We'll get to that. And the psychology of home as a fortress. Why guilty parties fear intrusion more than innocent ones. And Garrett, my question here for you is, what does it reveal when people work so hard to keep police out of their home? And how often does that tactic actually succeed?
Well, for many people, it's privacy. This is my home. I have a right to privacy, and we know that. But if somebody came and knocked on my door right now, law enforcement, while we're talking, and said, hey, I need to come in and look at your house, so this is why. I know you're the same, Anthony. We would say, come on in. Come and look. Look at anything you want. We're fine. No problem with it. We give you consent. But people who have something to hide don't want the police in their house at all. And they would say, come back when you get a warrant. You're not coming to my house until you have a warrant. But I feel that in this case, there was things going on with the child, with baby Emmanuel. They don't want the police coming in there and seeing how they're living. Heck, they wouldn't want child protective services in there. Wouldn't want their probation officer in there. They were definitely keeping secrets. His past, of course, already tells me that he definitely doesn't want the police in there.
Yeah, and I don't know if how this order breaks out, but think about this, guys. When the stories become inconsistent and the police are like, hey, man, I don't think these are victims here. I think there's something about what happened here that they may be responsible for. I think we got to go talk, but I think we got to start checking out property and all this other stuff, and all of a sudden they don't want to talk anymore. because they didn't want people. I mean, I'm assuming this could be correct. They didn't want people in the home. So once they realized that the stories were inconsistent, instead of pushing more effort to go ahead and get clarity, because they didn't call them liars. They were very careful of the verbiage that they used, which made a lot of sense to me. We discussed that in the last video a few days ago, where you don't want to call what could be a victim, especially a mother or a father, liar. So they said it's inconsistent. Very gentle in their verbiage. So what do you do when someone says, hey, what you're saying is a bit inconsistent? The first thing you do is you're going to want to clarify. That's what I would want to do. Well, what's inconsistent? Let me just see what doesn't connect. You want to come to the house and we'll have a chat or whatever it is. But the moment they challenged it, they saw inconsistency, they cut all things off. So for me, if my child was kidnapped, God forbid, and my statement wasn't making sense, maybe it's in the rush of the moment. Maybe I'm just excited. I didn't know what happened, what I was really saying at that moment. Because it was soon after I was giving my statement, soon after it happened. Hey, where do you want to meet up? You want to come to the house? I got to give you clarity because I want to get this moving. I believe in this case doing the opposite and not providing any statements anymore, and now trying to get a lawyer or whatever. I think all that was to stop them from looking at where they needed to be, which was in that house. So I think that's why again, with that false narrative, it keeps them away from that house. Because they knew that eventually, they would discover things in that house that ultimately would lead to the charges. And and again, I think I think they were discussing it, and I think all of a sudden there was some pressure that caused them to do this, like immediately. I really do. I think it was a discussion, but I think they jumped. There was some pressure because somebody wanted, hey, where's Emmanuel been? We haven't seen him in a while. So I got this. This is what kind of Gary mentioned before, but we'll kind of explore it a little bit more to create a simple, repeatable narrative. So simplicity as a defense under pressure, avoiding contradictions. Big five is part of a rehearsal script. And the danger of over-rehearsal when a story feels too polished is it raises suspicion. So, Gary, why do criminals often cling to the simplest story possible, and how quickly do investigators push to see if it falls apart?
Yeah, and I just want to say one thing on that last segment. Paranoia sets in. After a few days, they're getting paranoid. They're more paranoid, believing that things are starting to crush in on them, or the police are getting close, or somebody's going to be suspicious. So I think when paranoia set in, they came up with this simple plan of he was abducted, and kind of falls in with this next question. They want to keep a simple scenario so they can remember it better. Most criminals think, okay, we got to come up with something good, but we have to come up with something that we both remember. And when we're asked about it, we don't change up the story. Unfortunately, you could keep it simple or you could keep it complicated, but when you're lying, it's going to fall apart. Somewhere down the road, it's going to fall apart. You get good investigators on there, I mentioned before, you're going to change up the questions, and you're going to keep going and keep going. You can ask them these questions over and over. There's no limit as long as they're talking. And eventually they're going to say something that is going to discredit their statements from before and show the investigator that they're lying, which will lead the investigator to different areas.
Yeah, and I'm sure Guy would agree with this. When you come up with a story, there's got to be layers. I mean, and investigators are going to peel back those layers. You got to be, if something naturally happened, you're going to be able to answer these layers. I mean, at least beyond the surface. And I'll guarantee you, they were asking layer after layer, and there's probably things that she couldn't explain. Getting hit in the back, but your eye got bruised. What the person, I don't know, I was knocked out. Okay. What did you see? Just questions that can really pull back until they start to become inconsistent. And I'm going to tell you something, guys. It takes a lot of energy to lie. The truth is easy. It happened. It is what it is. But when you're lying, you got to think of a lie to cover another lie, to cover another lie, till eventually you just can't, and you wind up getting exhausted. It's funny too. After people get caught in so many lies, and they finally, someone catch them and says, listen, I know you're lying. This is what it is. Sometimes you hear them take a breath. Like they know they've been caught, but they're just so tired of just building the lies on top of the lies and being called out on it. And then on top of that, they may have remembered the surface story with each other, but as the story gets a bit deeper, Jake may have one interpretation of that story, and Rebecca may have another. So good investigators go beyond the surface and exploit the simplicity of the story. So I think that was a great question. But and also I want to mention something. If it's too perfect, where in some cases both parties are in sync, but they're too in sync, they are literally script, verbiage, everything is exactly the same. That's a little unique. Sometimes we don't, when investigators investigate, trust and believe, they are going to find inconsistencies because people see things differently. It just is what it is. But then when you're bringing everybody together and they all see things exactly the same way and it's scripted, I think that's definitely a huge red flag. And another thing too is when people tend to tell their stories and they're truthful, believe it or not, they may tell you a little bit about what happened prior. And then, a good bulk of maybe 50% of the story is going to be what happened during the incident. And then another 25% will be the recovery aspect, maybe even how they felt at the end of everything. But when people lie, they usually kind of spend a little bit too much beforehand, like maybe 33% of the story is going to be about all this. They're creating the context. And then the last 77% or whatever, the last 67% is going to be the embellished narrative. And there is of the incident, and there is no end result. There is no conclusion. There is no how they felt about all. It's just very an embellished beginning, an embellished narrative, and then blah. I learned that when I was taking interview and interrogation classes as well, and they say that it should be 25% beginning, 50% middle, 25% ending. And most of the time, when people are lying, they don't get that. They usually get 33% of a beginning that they're kind of just creating, and then another 67% of just too much talking about the incident. And then some people also say that for someone telling the truth, they could start anywhere from the story and continue forward, or even go backwards. Where people that lie, they recalled it in such a specific order. It's memorized in such a specific order that it's hard for them to kind of maneuver the story from any different starting point in every different direction, where someone that's honest could just tell you like that. Does that make sense, Gary?
Yes, absolutely. And everything you said is absolutely true. The truth is so easy to remember, but a lie, it gets tangled. It gets tangled. The more and more you talk about it, the more and more you answer questions. And when it gets tangled, it leads to falsifying answers that can later be used against you.
Yep. And that obviously they had them commit to their story first, sign their statement. So you got the evidence that this is the narrative they said. Plus, they also went on the news, and then they would go ahead and start questioning the narrative. And it's funny. I will say this during this process. So obviously, there's a difference between at first the cops are trying to help them until they become the people that are being accused. Then you see a whole different game. Nice Gary York becomes aggressive Gary York. Well, something you're saying isn't true. But I will say this. It's for detectives and investigators, they're very smart because it's a very timely move to go from helping someone to interrogation, because once that happens, you burn that relationship. So they're very careful of, hey, guess what? This doesn't make any sense. We're all in agreement. Yeah. Okay. Now we're going to try this a different way. And that's when their lawyers, they lawyer up, and now it's they're not looking to help. They're not looking to help find their child.
They want you to believe their story, and they want you to be on their side, which you can't do, but you let them go. You let them keep talking, and they want you to give a look to them like, okay, and they want that feeling of this investigator believes everything I'm saying. You don't have to. You can still give them that look until it's time to get tougher.
That's spot on. they want they as an investigator, you want them to believe that, okay, yeah, that makes sense what you're saying. Yes, that makes sense. And then you go back and you know what's another thing I like to add? Maybe at the very beginning, it could be something like, hey, Rebecca, tell me what happened today. Very simple. There's no pressure. Just tell me what happened. And they could do the same thing to Jake. Hey, Jake, tell me what happened today. No pressure. Let's get this narrative done with no pressure. But then maybe Jake says something that's inconsistent with what Rebecca says, and Rebecca says something that's inconsistent with what Jake says. So now the approach comes a little bit different later on. It'd be like, hey, Rebecca, I've been talking to Jake. Let me hear your side of the story again. Now you see there's pressure there, guys. Subtle, but there's pressure because Rebecca doesn't know what Jake said. So now you start to see Rebecca start to feel some pressure because I didn't tell Rebecca, tell me what happened. Now I'm saying, let me hear your side of the story. And I would do the same thing to Jake. Hey, Jake, I'm talking to Rebecca. Let me hear your side again. And now they start to craft because they don't know. And you want to hear something funny about that too? And Gary will probably agree with this. When you get to them and you say, hey, let me hear your side of the story, again, they don't know what you've heard. So they're going to try to begin to craft their narrative. They're going to try to skip over things wherever they feel the conflict is. And you have to get them to go back. So you let them talk. It's like, okay, I'm sorry, but what happened at this time? Because you seem to be skipping over it. Because that's the part where they're not comfortable because they don't know what the other party has said or what you've heard. So I believe that was definitely played out. Moment when they went from helping them to saying, you know what? Now I'm accusing you. Does that make sense, Gary?
Yes, it's when it comes to husband and wife suspects, boyfriend, girlfriend suspects, when you put them in that predicament you just explained, it becomes like that old show, The Dating Game. Uh-oh, wonder what he said. I wonder what she said. Okay, I know her well enough. She probably said this. I know him well enough. He might have said that. And that's where they start to mess up. And then they start having to guess based on how well they know each other. And that's where their cookie begins to crumble.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, what you just said is so funny because each one is reacting to what they think the other person would do. So they wind up like, if I'm Rebecca, I'm reacting as if what Jake would do. And if I'm Jake, Jake's reacting to what Rebecca would do. And it's just you're going to find inconsistency there. Now, obviously, number 4 is a simple one to buy time, extra hours for hiding evidence or regrouping. That's why I'm thinking maybe they were pressured to get the story out there really quick. Because I don't know, maybe someone was asking about Emmanuel. I don't know. And hey, we got to get the story out now because if we don't, they're going to find out what happened. So I think that there was pressure there. Lies as a stalling tactic, common sense, and investigators' urgency is in the first 48 hours. So I use that as a to buy time because I figure the longer you prepare, you know that they're going to come in hard the first 48 hours. So if you're going to create a narrative, you want to try to stall as much time as you can because those first 48 hours, they're going to hit you hard because those first 48 hours are where they could be most successful. And then investigators' awareness of stalling behaviors and how they counter them. That's kind of one of the bullets I mentioned. And hey, Gary, how valuable is the time gained by a false story? Again, for Jake and Rebecca's perspective. And why does it often end up backfiring on the suspect who uses it?
You have to remember that they're trying to obstruct an investigation. They're planning out, how can we obstruct this investigation? How can we make it hard on the investigators to figure out the truth? How can we stall things to get the media on our side? Even they may think, okay, this poor story. Oh, our child's abducted. We want to swing everybody on our side. The poor parents who had their child abducted. So the buying the time buys them time to get their thoughts together, get their plan together. But it backfires. And how it backfires is when their whole plan crumbles and investigators prove that they're lying, their statements are inconsistent, their statements don't match the evidence. And in the end, folks, they're going to be sitting in a courtroom if they take this to trial, if they don't do a plea. And the prosecuting attorneys will use all those proven false statements, all those proven lies against them. They're going to say, this is what they said here. This is what really happened. They lied during the investigation. And the prosecutors will use that to show the jury what type of people they are. That's just one piece of the trial. Then they'll have to have evidence and hopefully a body by then. But these are things they do, stall tactics to try to gain an advantage, which in the end, it really never works out for them.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, the biggest success is within those first 48 hours. So if I was a detective, and this is where it's tough because there's a lot of feeling involved here, but if I was a detective, experienced detective, and I start feeling that they're taking me down the wrong path, but I don't really have evidence on it. It's something I feel. I may have to act on it because we're acting on limited time. So I may have to say, hey, you know what? We got to bring them back in because I feel like they're running us around. And I'm going to be honest with you guys. I know that happens a lot where there may not be enough evidence that they're lying, but there's not enough evidence to support their narrative. And at one point, that you have to have detectives already looking into ulterior motives, like why there were some detectives probably working on the angle of their victims. Let's help them. I will guarantee you, at the same time, there are probably people already, getting ready to approach them if they're not the victims, because that's how fast this needs to move within those first 48 hours, right? Am I right with that, Gary?
Correct. And they're trying to get them to run down a rabbit hole, so they make a lot of mistakes during those first 48 hours. Thank goodness in this case, it sounds to me like the investigators were really on it and were not going to give much of a chance before they got out of that rabbit hole and said, listen, we don't believe your story and this is this and this. And then they made the arrest.
Yeah. And again, those first 48 hours are critical. That's what starts the momentum for the rest of the investigation. Now, number 5, I put the control public perception. Early stories shape sympathy, community influences pressure, using narratives to sway initial opinion. And you got social media and word of mouth as accelerators of early narratives. And before I give Gary the question, I want to mention to the audience, they got on there, they gave their narrative. If the narrative was a believable narrative, it would be harder for the police because of the pressure to go ahead and call what would be looked at by the victims, be looked at as victims as, no, they did it because they already got the public support. It's crazy how initial impressions matter. If they played out their story a bit better, if they looked a little bit more emotional, and the police are doing their interviews and they realize something's not right, I'm going to call the family out on this, the pressure that the police would have to have faced if they were wrong. Like, it would be just the same thing. How could you say that to the mother when they're grieving? How could you say that to the grieving father? So it's a very smart move, as long as it's prepared, to get out there and create the narrative first, because what you're going to try to do is you're going to build pressure based on your narrative that will actually help support you. So if the police try to turn against you, you got the support of the community saying, how could you turn against this mother? But thank God the community didn't fall for this one. Thank God social media didn't fall for this one. Thank God they recognize things, because then the police shouldn't have to worry so much about the pressure of now turning a victim into the person who did it, which I know was not easy. I know making that decision to do that was not easy, but the good part about it is there was no outside influence in stopping them from doing it. If not, they were motivating them. What's your thoughts, Gary?
Well, they have a right to a trial by jurors, a jury panel of impartial jurors. And for them, it's very important to get the sympathy going on their side. Because if you think that the media and the outside attention does not affect a jury panel, you're wrong. We want a jury panel to start out on equal playing field. The prosecuting attorney and the defense attorney, when they pick a jury, want to make sure everybody is on equal playing field. But we can't get into the minds of everybody. That's why there's an old saying in law enforcement. We have to have all the evidence we can get and put it together, because we never know what a jury is going to do or what a jury is going to decide. Was someone on that jury panel influenced by the early media and the early outside influence?
Yeah, and as I said, Jake's past is definitely the main target here. But I could picture maybe in an effort to manipulate, I could picture a quick discussion where he says, "Hey, we got to go out public with this as fast as we can." Maybe that's why they did it at a big five. Maybe that was actually a little bit more strategic as we talk about it because they knew that could get public attention. And then maybe Jake said we can control the narrative, which can make it a bit uncomfortable for police to go against the narrative. So let's paint ourselves as victims, and doing it at Big Five, which is a big, shopping center, that's going to get attention. And then that gives us a chance to create our narrative because I'm very strategic. So now that now that you progress in the dialogue, and this is why we do it. But that could have been definitely something. Why the Big Five? When you were doing the narrative, why did you choose Big Five? Did you choose it because you thought they didn't have surveillance? But that doesn't really make a lot of sense because there could have been cameras elsewhere. Maybe you thought it because that would get you the attention you need to create the narrative in order to get the public on your side. Very interesting. Now we have to minimize Rebecca's exposure. So again, it's probably more from Rebecca's perspective, but story portraying Rebecca as passive. So basically, she got knocked out. Someone took her child. Shielding herself from direct suspicion because, again, she put herself as the victim because she ran to the store and said, "Hey, someone took my child. Someone took my child." Creating distance from Jake's actions. So, she's, again, it says here that it's to minimize Rebecca's exposure. But I think here when it says creating distance from Jake's actions, she's protecting Jake here. Putting the baby in the hands of somebody else that you'll never catch because that person doesn't exist. So, yeah, Jake may have a history, and I knew that was going to come up. So with that said, I'm not going to say anything about Jake making let's not minimize what he done. Let's not say he made a mistake. Let's not say he rolled over on the baby or some rumor mill that they got into a fight and they stepped on the baby. They'll never believe that because of Jake's history. So I got to remove Jake from the equation. And then the balancing act of protecting Jake while also positioning herself for leniency. So, Gary, was Rebecca using the lie more to protect herself or Jake? And why do accomplices often hide behind the role of an unaware partner?
Well, I truly believe that she is going to try to separate herself from Jake as much as possible as she has more time to sit and think about this situation. If she continues to cover for Jake and herself, she's going to dig herself a deeper hole. I don't know what her attorney's telling her, but if I was her attorney, I would say, if you continue to cover for you and Jake together, you're going to go down the hole in worse fashion. You're going to have to think about yourself at some point and get out with the truth and tell everything that happened. You're not going to get away with what you've done, but you definitely could come out better if you tell us the truth.
I got a crazy spin on this just now. It just came to my head. And again, that's years of working in prisons. I mean, I write books on manipulation. So if I was Jake, right, I would put Rebecca in the middle of that narrative. Because remember, Rebecca made a narrative that she witnessed this. So if anybody's going to be called out as a liar first, it's going to be her. So that puts her in the middle of the narrative. So cover up, she did it. I mean, she's in the middle of that narrative. And then you got Jake already participating in the search. I mean, there's nothing to say that Jake won't turn against her. Because at the end of the day, out of everything here, I don't know. I mean, Jake, yes, he was on the press conference, right? And he said the same thing, but he could say, well, I was only saying what Rebecca told me. That's what she told me. So now I'm out there telling you her story. So, Jake could have easily twisted it and said, you know what? This is her story, her interpretation, and he can kind of free himself a little bit from that. So that is a bit interesting that he's the main. I still think it's him, but then she puts herself in the narrative. I think that's his way also of having some control over her. At the end of the day, is you gave the lie. You're the one that told the false story, not me. You're the one that mess with the investigation. I mean, there's a huge level of responsibility with that. So that's actually, I mean, I don't know where I was technically going with that, but I think it's definitely something worth thinking about. Would you agree with that, guy? She's the center of the false narrative.
He's definitely manipulative. He definitely, I think, intimidates her or had intimidated her. And that's what he's going to use to try to help himself. Look, she's the one that made that story up. She lied. I'm not lying. Look at me. I'm the innocent guy here. I want to tell you this, what really happened. That's why she needs to get on the ball before he takes advantage of all these things that I think he has set up himself to bring this whole scenario about.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's other things to explain. Like he was there trying to show where the body is, but I mean, right off the bat, she put herself directly involved in that false narrative. So at the end of the day, she lied to the police at the most vulnerable of times where they could have gone and maybe had a jump on that investigation a bit quicker. Two more areas. This is a quick one to deflect Child Protective Service scrutiny. So I have their past with Child Welfare Services. Now I don't know if I looked up. I don't know if Rebecca. I'm trying to find that. Maybe you guys in the audience know, but we know Jake did. Jake has a history with them. Why CPS oversight was a threat to them. We kind of discussed this in past shows. Narrative as a barrier against deeper checks. Because again, if CPS was involved, they're going to check that house. But again, I don't know if they were directly involved with this relationship because I find it hard to believe that a pattern of abuse would not get noticed by CPS. And then how prior CPS records can be a ticking time bomb once law enforcement's involved. Now, again, I did look it up. If you guys know, please let me know. Was CPS involved with Rebecca and Jake because of Jake? Were they involved with that relationship as well because of Jake? I'm hearing that there was no proof that there was a direct involvement with Jake and Rebecca. And then how much does past CPS involvement raise the stakes, and could earlier intervention have changed the course? But guys, we answered that before. I don't really see a sense of revisiting unless Gary has something new he wants to add.
Just very short. Had Child Protective Services been involved, yes, baby Emmanuel possibly would be alive today. Had the judge sentenced Jake to prison in the first place, baby Emmanuel would probably still be alive today. And as you said, we talked that to death the other day.
Yeah. And guys, I just want you to know, we know that if Jake was locked up, Emmanuel would not be born, but we do say that Emmanuel will be alive today because basically the thing is we wouldn't have another child hurt by Jake. Let's just do it that way. Last question is to keep control of each other. Now, guys, we kind of touched on it, but there's some more here to explore. So obviously they share lies as a bond. They fear of one breaking the pact. So this isn't loyalty. This is leverage. Mutual dependency through deception, and shared lies as a form of psychological blackmail. If I go down, you go down, and we discussed that. And now, Gary, here, do shared lies represent loyalty or survival? And how does a fabricated story ultimately tie people together in destructive ways? I want to mention one thing here. This is not loyalty. This is leverage. And leverage could be mistaken as loyalty, but it doesn't hold weight like loyalty. I have seen in my career a bunch of officers, let's just say, that get caught up and do something foolish, and you think they're loyal because they're sticking together because they're loyal to each other. They're not. They're sticking together because each one has leverage on the other, and each one's afraid to do the right thing because they don't know which way that leverage is going to go. That's why investigators are quickly able to break up that loyalty, because all they have to do is promise the one that they think is the least involved, that no matter what they say, we got you. Now you tell us what happened. Once you alleviate that leverage, guess what goes with it? Loyalty. And I think that's where this matters here. The shared story that they have is not built out of loyalty. It's built out of leverage. And like Gary said, it could be whoever cracks first. If they don't find the body of Emmanuel, that showcases the pattern of abuse and everything. If they don't find that body, then honestly, I think the body is where you can get the main conviction, which I think will go towards Jake. But if they don't find that body, I mean, could there be a chance that both partners could be held responsible, and it's going to be a matter of who cracks first?
Well, absolutely. And at this point, it is self-preservation and trying to avoid the consequences of legal actions taken against them, and cover-ups and lies. That's what's all going on here, not loyalty to each other. It's all about how do we avoid legal consequences? How do we get out of this mess? And if they do not find the body of baby Emmanuel, they'll have a trial, and they will have to use circumstantial evidence. But believe me, there's a lot more evidence out there than we've heard so far. Don't think the investigators have given the media all the evidence they have so far. They've given them a lot of information about what they've uncovered, what they believe. But in the end, between their statements being proven as lies, between her staged act of an abduction, there is a lot of evidence out there that a circumstantial evidence trial could be done, and done convincingly.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, Gary. I think they have to get Rebecca to pull back on that false narrative. That's key. If they can get her to pull back on the false narrative, then it can open up the door. I think a big part of her concern is the consequences of that false narrative. But I think that could be leverage for Jake. So I think if they can get her to pull back that false narrative, because I think it's obviously Jake. So I think because of his past history, I think it's him. So if the concerns are to find that body, and you have to try to figure out, well, I got to hold somebody responsible, but I also need to find that body. I'd rather see them work with Rebecca than Jake. That's all I'm saying. But if Rebecca is afraid that if she pulls back on her story, that these are going to be the consequences, then they may wind up, Jake may wind up breaking first. And I'd like to see what they do with that. That's why you need that body. And I think Rebecca knows that. I think Rebecca stays with the story in another effort to protect Jake, but also to protect herself, because she knows, one, maybe she was involved in the actual assault, or two, hey, you didn't report this? Look at this baby. This baby had patterns of abuse that you never reported as a mother. So there's going to have to be some deals made with her if they're ever going to fold against Jake, or they'll just may say, you know what? This is not even an option. You both had no business to be with children. So at this point here, there is no deal, whatever it is. We're both charging you fully. And again, I think that's easier said than done, because if you don't have the body, there are going to be people that are going to want closure. They're going to want that body. And sometimes you may see detectives scramble a little bit, even after the fact, long after the fact, where they say, hey, this person did a few years in prison, maybe less eyes on them. Maybe we could try to see if we can get them to talk a little bit more and find out where this body is. Because I've seen deals made to find bodies because there are people that want that closure. But this is a great topic. I mean, guys, we're just figuring it out as we go, but I think there was a lot discussed here. We'd love to get your thoughts put in the comments. Again, it's just a friendly dialogue amongst people that want to see the right thing done by Emmanuel, or through Emmanuel. Hey, Gary, anything you'd like to say in closing?
Well, just one thing now that you brought up. Could Jake have disposed of the body but not told Rebecca where the body is, because he says, I'm going to be the only one that knows where the body is, because I don't want her breaking down and talking? So many narratives. We'll watch, we'll stand by, and we'll see what happens.
So you know what? That is a very, hold on, guy, because that's a very good point. And that is a very good point. And I thought of that. So that's if Jake knows the body, once found, will truly only convict him. But it also could be the body could give him leverage, and he could still say, she knows, she's just not telling you. So this is where we put the body after she did this. Because remember, she created the narrative.
Yeah.
So he could be the accessory and say, hey, you know what? After she did this, this is where we buried the body. And then she ran out and told you some BS story.
He could be holding the cards. And
what kills her is that false narrative. She put herself in the center of the false narrative, creating a story that he can now feed on. So he could say, hey, you know what? I helped her hide the body, but she's the one that ultimately beat the child to death. So, it's interesting. That's why I think it's safe at this time, charge them both, because, either they're going to work together or they're going to work against each other, which can make it more confusing. And you know what? You know what's funny? Same thing with inmates, sadly. I see two inmates get into a fight. I don't really care who's right or wrong. You're both getting charged.
Yeah.
I don't got time to figure out this BS. You're both getting charged, and figure it out during your appeal.
Yep.
Hey, Gary, anything you like closing again? Books, anything?
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Please give us your thoughts, your comments. Bring about a lot more discussion. Thank you very much.
And guys, don't forget to check out Gary on his YouTube channel, True Prison Stories with Gary York. And he's got a few books on the market that you can find on Amazon. Look up Gary York, and you'll find a lot of books. Corruption Behind Bars, just a lot of good books, guys. As always, guys, stay safe.